Namaste and good evening, everyone. Welcome to our continuing series, Evenings with Sraddhalu. Namaste.
Namaste and welcome to everybody.
We are happy to continue today on the same theme, the current affairs. And today we will have a special focus on the events happening in India. But first, we have an important announcement and a few comments that we have from our viewers.
Yes. So the announcement is regarding a facility which many have felt the need for, because across our discussions in the Evenings with Sraddhalu series, was begun by Narad, we have covered such a variety of topics, and sometimes certain areas have also had some repetition across a few years, and it's difficult to go back to something which you remember having read but cannot now find easily. So there was always a need for some kind of a transcript, and I am happy to announce that thanks to the efforts of Shiva, Shanta and Monica, we have actually got a complete transcript of the first 195 episodes of the evening series on the website of integralstudies.in. So the YouTube channel is independent, the website is independent, and if ever there is something which we cannot put on the YouTube channel, it will be put on the website, because that cannot be taken down easily. Also, sometimes complementing information we have put on the website to make it easier, particularly certain articles which might be easily banned or edited by the powers that be, relating to those injections and things like that. So I would highly recommend for those of you who are interested to go to integralstudies.in, and you will see there are only 6 posts currently. I don't expect to put too many or too frequently at least. And there is one which is called Transcript of Sessions. There are also other things which I had put on various topics for download, which have been left there. And do take a look, and there is also a built-in system for search, I understand, with WordPress. And if it's not active, I'm sure it will be activated shortly. But we'll be able to then go to any of the past sessions. We have got 130 already in place, the first 130. And you should be able to scan through the text, but also there are links at every paragraph to the actual video. So from the link, you can jump to the video directly. And also, for those of you who had asked for transcripts or subtitles in other languages, you can look at the transcript here and use the Google Page Translate to immediately get a translation, which should be reasonably good. And so many have been asking even in the chat box for transcripts in French or other languages. So all this is now easily available, and I want to thank once again all the efforts made by Shiva, Shant and Monica. And perhaps in time others may also join in and help. So this was a very positive announcement I wanted to make. It's all right. We'll just continue. Can you tell me where it got cut off?
So I was about to go to the question.
Okay, then go ahead. You just go ahead. The next comment.
We have a comment from Arnab. You may need to share a small clarification in your next episode with regard to Khaleda Zia. Zia, or Ziaur Rahman, was her husband and not father. She was born in Jalpaiguri, and her father's name was Iskandar Ali Majumder. Her birth year also seems to be 1945, but the date of 15th of August is disputed. No government-issued document states her birthday as 15 August. In fact, her matriculation examination certificate lists a birth date of 9 of August 1945. Her marriage certificates list 5 September 1945, and her passport indicates a birth date of 19 August 1945 as per Wikipedia. Her father also claimed 5th September as her actual birthday, as cited in a Bangladeshi monthly called Nipun.
Okay. So it's interesting. Thank you for the correction that Zia or Rahman was her husband. is her husband, not father. But the interesting observations about the birth dates. Imagine a person has 4 different birth dates depending on what they are doing. So there's a public statement, there's a matriculation examination certificate, there is a marriage certificate, and then her father's statement. So 4 different birth dates. Why would they be so? Think about it, because sometimes in India, for example, we do have that still coming up when they don't know a birthday, so they just make it up, or when they want to change the date here and there to get certain benefits in the school admission and so on. But why would you have 4 different? And it just shows that there is already a culture of deception in the family. And all these things are important in the long term when we see the behavior of these people. So thank you for the correction. But also I want to point out that I apologize for sometimes there are these small slips of certain details, because my goal is to show what is happening in broad strokes, general trends. And sometimes because of a mix-up in short-term memory, or because I have not paid attention or even gone too deep into certain things which to me seem quite irrelevant, there may be such lapses. But keep in mind that the broader picture is what I am aiming at. I want to recall last time we had a very important discussion regarding what is happening in Bangladesh, and some points I want to summarize, some points I want to add just to close that topic since this correction has been made. You will recall that the present Prime Minister Hasina of Bangladesh had already announced in May, after a landslide victory and her 4th term, she had already announced that she was under pressure from the US to hand over St. Martin's Island, and there was a deliberate conspiracy to carve out a Christian country like East Timor, which would then be aligned to certain Western powers and Western interests, because as it is today, you will see everywhere where there are conversions to Christianity, it is always done so that allegiance can be had to the Pope or to certain Western powers which control the Christian dialogue. And it's for this reason that China actually disconnected the church in China, made a church of China which is no more connected with the Pope and so on, to protect national interests. Such a thing did not happen in India, and to this day it turns out that the Catholic Church, which the British had promoted, still holds enormous properties which are largely under control indirectly of the Vatican or other interests. So this is just to show you that these are complex issues. The followers of the religion may not themselves be conscious of or even be intentionally participating, but often the control through religion is a mind control finally, and it's used as a tool of control. So at that point we also noted that Hasina was warned by India of a threat to her and the mistake that she would have made in appointing the current army chief, who is a hardline Islamist, and she trusted him because he's a cousin. And so we have what we clearly saw is a military coup by radical Islamic ideology. It has strong links to Pakistan, and this is evidenced by the fact that when these people came to power, the first thing they did, they destroyed and vandalized the statues and the museum of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. This is the man who is celebrated by the whole of Bangladesh as the father of Bangladesh, because he separated Bangladesh from Pakistan. Very highly respected. And it's not normal that a mob which is asking for the country to be free is going to destroy his symbols, his statues, or his museum. It is only those who want Bangladesh to be part of radical Islam and Pakistan who would want that to happen, because they are upset that Bangladesh became independent. So when they officially declared that this is second independence of Bangladesh, actually it is not so. It is a reversal from the independence back to the dependence of the hardline ideology. We also see this in the release of Khaleda Zia, who is a radical Islamist who was involved in an attempted murder, she and her son, of the present Prime Minister. We also see this in the fact that during those riots, as well as post-riots, after Hasina is removed, there is an attack on Hindu temples and massacre of Hindus in large numbers, massive numbers. And Hasina was the force which held back the hardline Islamic ideology. And hardline Islamic ideology is hardline. So anytime somebody holds it back, it is seen as a dictator because you're pushing back against something which is pushing hard again. Similarly, we see this in Iraq, where Saddam Hussein was holding back hardline Islamic ideology. Iraq was one of the most advanced in its, although Islamic country, it was one of the most liberal, the most advanced. And when he was toppled, it was by these hardline Islamists, and then you see the result of what follows. So we see the same here. We also see the role of Khaleda Zia's son Tariq, who was involved in a 2004 assassination attempt on Hasina while she was an opposition leader. And she survived the attack, but many people died. And he was actually given a life imprisonment. He escaped, and he was working behind the scenes for this coup, which also. So these are all hardliners. And I've put again several links because I'm making these statements. These are important statements. I'm backing them with links. So those of you who want to go deeper, you will find important observations there. But also we must notice now, once the government comes to power, the interim so-called government, it's not elected, remember. It's a self-selected hardline government. And you can see how the content of this hardline government, it consists of large number of radical Islamic leaders and opposition BNP leaders, but not one from the Awami League leaders. So it's obviously something which is entirely against Hasina's stance, which was non-extremist ideology, and so it is all the extremists ganged up together, and they are declared as advisors to the interim government. So who is the government actually? Interesting. The government actually is still the army chief who decides what the government is going to do. But he has created this facade of an appearance. But what I want you to observe particularly is how the media is playing the game, how the media is lying to you, how the media is spinning the whole thing as if it's completely normal, that things are better in Bangladesh and finally a tyrant has been overthrown and so on. Observe the vocabulary, observe how not one person is saying that this is a military coup, removing a duly elected government, and the people who have come to power now, normally under Bangladeshi constitution, once the parliament is dissolved, you have to hold elections within 1.5 months. To this day, it's now nearly a week. Not one statement about when they will have elections. Instead, the whole focus has been on creating some false cases against Hasina, so that if she tries to come back for elections, then they will arrest her rather than allowing her to stand for elections. So she will not be allowed to come back. And so observe rather this. I don't think I will comment too much more unless something important happens. But the goal of these discussions was to make you conscious, to show you how things are played out so that you can watch and figure out for yourself. So I think we have enough information to see how this is working. Notice also, there's one article I've put which has some additional information, that when the police was beaten back by the attackers, by the demonstrators, I would call them terrorists, but maybe that's too harsh a term, but these were goons. When the police was attacked, policemen were killed. Among the number of 400 deaths, so to say, are included the policemen who were killed by the goons. And so when the police defended themselves or ran away from their police stations, and at that point Hasina asked the military to protect the democratic institutions, the military chief refused. The army chief refused, and subsequently when Hasina was forced to leave under threat of life, and her party members demonstrated against this forcible expulsion, at that point the army came and shot them. So you see, the army is not shooting to protect democratic institutions, it's shooting to attack a particular party whose head has been deliberately, forcibly expelled. So you see again the clear bias and who is controlling, who is calling the shots. We see also the State Department who is supporting the toppling of a democratically elected government and is favoring military rule. And you notice this has been a pattern going back to the 1970s. That consistently the US supported military rulers in Pakistan, in Bangladesh and many other countries also, but these are the two neighbors immediately of relevance. Note also that there is a very important distinction between India and Pakistan and Bangladesh in terms of Hindus and Muslims. Remember, the partition was on the principle that the religion defines a different country, and so Muslims are to go away into their country and all others will stay in India, which would be then technically at least a Hindu India. In practice, what happened was the reverse. Those who were in Pakistan who didn't want partition were forced to remain there, and those who wanted partition in India remained by choice in India because they thought it was better for them. There is actually a video of, I could not find the article just now, but I have it, I have saved it. Just recently, 2 days ago, in Pakistan, there is a discussion where the parliamentarians of Pakistan openly say that thank God that the Muslims of India did not come into Pakistan. And they are looking at purely numbers. And the number of Muslims who were in India were slightly more than the Muslims who were living in Pakistan. And they say, imagine if they had come, Pakistan would have been would have too many Muslims, and we don't want so many. It's better they stay in India. And they're saying this openly. And they say we have to thank the Congress Party and Nehru for this. Very interesting. And finally, when the partition actually took place, both Bangladesh and Pakistan had 20 to 22% Hindu population, which today is reduced to less than 1.5%. India had a 10% population of Muslims, which is now more than 14%. But remember, all the numbers have gone up. So actually Muslim population in India has gone fourfold more. And this is just to tell you that in practice, Muslims in India are happier than they are in Bangladesh or in Pakistan, which is why you have this constant across the border illegal immigrations and so on. But this is to show you that the partition itself is such a deep falsehood. It has been harmful for everybody. I want to show another angle which is now linking to India, because our theme today is more about India. Notice how in India, not one single opposition leader in India has spoken up for the Hindus being massacred in Bangladesh. They've all kept quiet. And you have to ask yourself why. Because the primary opposition in India today has as its base the need to appear to be inimical to Hindu interests within India. So their primary vote base are groups which are extremist in ideology, who are against Hindus or Hinduism or against India having a Hindu past or present. And so these opposition parties necessarily represent an interest that is better aligned to Pakistan's interest and Bangladesh interest than India's interests. And this is a very important point to state. And I'm sorry it has to be stated in such blunt terms, but this is the reality and you have to see this. Not one opposition leader has dared to speak up. What happened, interestingly, Mamata Banerjee actually made this observation. She did not speak up for the Hindus in Bangladesh. She did not say anything controversial about Hasina being thrown out or whoever comes to power. All she said was, I will follow whatever the center decides. Now why? Why couldn't she take a stance openly? Because if she takes a stance which is for Hasina, then her Muslim base, which is a primary base of her constituency, would go against her. And if she took a stance against Hasina openly, then she would be exposed for a bias which is anti-Indian. So the result is a very convenient statement, which is, oh, I will follow whatever the center wants. And it's not done because it's out of good intention. It's simply to not make a controversial statement at all and pass the buck to others. So all this is to give you a context for what is happening in India. And we now look at India and we see that exactly what happened in Bangladesh. To some extent, a similar pattern took place in Sri Lanka. Is being replicated, was being replicated, is being replicated in India. Now, there's one article I have put also, which is comparing, I think I've put in all 25 articles, but it's comparing what happened in Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. And it's very important to see. In Sri Lanka, similarly, a regime change took place. The then president was forced to flee. It was not done by the army. It actually seems to have been a popular uprising, but still it doesn't make sense. There were some alignments. I don't know details and I didn't study the situation too much. But I want to point out one thing. Very quickly, the power shifted. Power was handed over even before the president fled. He handed over power to the next in command. It moved to new elections, and the elections were completed. Bangladesh, this is not happening, will not happen. And the same in Pakistan, whenever the military has taken over, it has not happened. Why? This difference is important. Because Sri Lanka is primarily Hindu and Buddhist. It is not Islamist based. And this is a very important point I had made last time. Wherever you have strong Islam, there is a problem with democratic processes, because somehow inherently in the framework and mindset of the teaching, the way Islam is presented today, and it does not have to be essential to the religion, but the way it is presented today, it has a hardline turn which prevents any kind of democratic process. Inherent to the way it is taught, there is an indoctrination and an attempt at a top-down control, and which is accepted because of the nature of the training and the teaching. So this is a background I wanted to give for comparing, and now we come to India. We'll just look at the questions and comments about this. Yes, Alina.
We have two questions. One from Subodh. What lessons Indian leadership can take with all that has happened in Bangladesh? And from Arnurata, can you talk about Bharat's election results? Although the BJP and allies have won the elections and would shortly form the government, but it seems to be projected as defeat of the Hindu majority. There seems to be a dip in the energy, and the defeatist mentality seems to be creeping. Could we ever unite for the sake of the country?
Yes. So this question actually came earlier. It was just after the elections, but we were at that time in a different topic. So I've kept it for now. And it's better we do it now because hindsight allows us a certain benefit. And I would like to look at what happened just before the elections. What is very peculiar. So first question is about Subodh. He says, what are the lessons we can take from Bangladesh? And the lessons, as you will see when I list out certain observations, the exact same thing which happened in Bangladesh is and was planned for India. And we'll see shortly how the things were put in place. A lot of those things were set aside or postponed for later. It's not over, it's not gone. But they've been postponed for later because of certain advantages that the toolkit operation in India led to certain benefits which they did not want to lose. So some of those more extreme forms of overthrow have been postponed. But now let's look at what happened actually. And the observation Anuradha makes that in the whole media in India, although the BJP came to power with overwhelming strength, they did not on their own get an overwhelming majority. That's all. But in their alliances, they still came with an overwhelming strength. So the problem is the BJP as a party is dependent on its alliances. At least two of the alliances it is dependent on. So somehow this was presented with great celebration, both in the Indian media, which was inimical to BJP or Modi, and because it's largely controlled by the Congress, leftist and other interests, and as well as in the Western media. It was as if Modi had lost. They were actually making statements as if Modi had lost, although he had won. So, and we have to ask ourselves why. Why were they so happy and what was the excitation? And this we will understand only when you look at what was actually done as a toolkit operation within India. Now, I'm going to list out things. I want to, first of all, start with an apology, because from the point where the elections were preparing and I noticed the toolkit operation taking place in India for the regime change, I began to document all the events. And it's as if I've gathered more than 40 or 50 different news items which were important at that point because they have very specific information which momentarily appears and then vanishes because the powers that be don't want that information to remain. So I've actually put a very large number of links even regarding India, because I'm going to make certain statements which are going to be somewhat perhaps shocking or dramatic. So just about India I have, I think in all I have put 26 links, and just for India I have about 19 links. 7 of them are for Bangladesh. Okay, the other references in Bangladesh. Okay, so for India, one of the points, one of the links which I have put also, which starts with this idea why Rahul Gandhi will not speak up for Bangladeshi Hindus. And it's an important point. He will not speak up because one of the basis for the Congress attempt to get back to power and overthrow Modi was to create a division in society. And it's a very strategic method. The strength of India has been this, what we have always called as, Sri Aurobindo described it as a unity in diversity. By the way, Indira Gandhi in the political sphere used this phrase, unity in diversity, when speaking of India. And this phrase came from Sri Aurobindo because Kirit Joshi wrote that speech of Indira Gandhi. Kirit Joshi, who was in the ashram, had joined Indira Gandhi as a, I think, educational advisor or something. And as an advisor, he had access and she knew his intellectual brilliance. She asked him many times to write her speeches. And so this is how this phrase from Sri Aurobindo has been introduced in the political sphere of India. Today, the opposition parties will also quote unity in diversity as strength of India, but by that they mean that you have to now allow all the diverse interests to be given their special privileges and not be united, to be fighting for their piece of the pie. And this is the only way that they are able to play vote banks against each other or get them to support them. So we are going to see a lot of these things. I will try to go through. Wherever possible, I will make a reference to some links I have put, but otherwise assume that everything I'm saying is backed by some references. So what you saw was just before, prior to elections, nearly 6 months before, the primary opposition party organized All India tours. And there were 2 tours in which they promoted Rahul Gandhi as the opposition leader. And the tours were passing through supposedly all the states of India, where the primary objects, what you saw, if you observe carefully, when you make a tour, what do you say in each state or in each speech, and who are the people you meet to build alliances? And what you saw Rahul Gandhi actually meeting some of there was one particular Christian priest who would speak of statements which were abusing Hindu deities in a very crude and violent term. And Rahul Gandhi met him and he received from him very deep knowledge, and he publicly praised him, saying, "Oh, I've learned so much from him." About what? And this is a man, and if you see some of his speeches in Tamil, it was in Tamil Nadu, he is so abusive. He speaks of the Hindu deities in such abusive terms. But that's the kind of people he meets. And he demands everywhere he goes, he demands a caste census for every field. For the army, for the teachers, for government hirings, everywhere there has to be a caste census so that we can have an equitable representation. So even for example, when there was after the Modi government came to power, post elections, they had their annual budget. There's a photograph of the people who prepared the budget, and Rahul made this statement in Parliament saying that it did not have enough backward caste representation. So you see, the mentality is, it doesn't matter who's doing the work or what they are doing the work in terms of quality, content and national interest. Everywhere there has to be representation of precisely those vote banks, which are castes and communities, which are useful for them and which are used to pit one against the other and to divide the pie. And every one of these opposition parties vies against how much more can we give to such and such vote banks and take away from the general public quota. So this caste census is very dangerous. It was also begun earlier by Sonia Gandhi, about nearly 15 years ago, when under Manmohan Singh, she had announced that there would be a caste census within the Indian army to divide the army along communal lines and religious lines. And the idea would have been, oh, there are not enough Muslims or Christians in position of power, so now promotions should be based on their religion or their caste status and so on. And fortunately at that time the army chief took a firm stance and said, The Indian army is not built along caste lines, it is built on love for the country, and he dismissed that whole suggestion. But this idea has been brought up violently, forcefully, just before elections. He promises openly to remove the 50% quota limit. Now understand that when India became free, the idea of reservations was that there were certain groups or communities which did not have benefits of education or otherwise. And so there was a certain reservation made for them. And the reservation was a small amount, and it was declared in the constitution that within 10 years this would be removed because it won't be necessary. What has happened is, because of the political convenience of parties building vote banks, the numbers have increased more and more, until at some point Supreme Court said, okay, it should not, reservations should not cross 50%. Now imagine, already 50% is ridiculous as a number, because the number of people who are being put in the reservations are less than 50% in terms of community divisions. And then you have communities vying against each other. I am more forward, I am less forward, I am more backward than the other backward, so I should get more reservation. And this has been the bane of inequality and value in public discourse. I will actually come to a statement which was made by a Supreme Court judge, which is so disappointing. I'll just say it now. There's the Supreme Court judge who actually made the statement. I've put again the link. So Justice Gawai says, without Dalit identity, I wouldn't be a Supreme Court judge today. And this is a judge, so he's supposed to be able to think. And what that means is that his elevation to a Supreme Court position was because of Dalit identity and not competence. And imagine if this becomes the norm. Why he said that, we will come to shortly in the context. But he needed to say that because that's part of the toolkit program that they had organized. The idea is now more and more reservation against so-called upper caste. Now who's an upper caste? The numbers are so small. And the numbers are not even properly defined. The backward castes are defined in categories. The against who is not even clearly defined. And so this whole thing has become such a perversion. And Rahul promises to remove the 50% limit which was put 20, 30 years ago by the Supreme Court. And now is going to be reservations going all the way through. He promises also rupees 1 lakh per year to every woman if they vote the Congress to power. And they actually, now this is the problem, when they earlier made promises, people got wind of it and nobody believed the promises. So this time they gave them a coupon. The Congress party gave coupons in the thousands, lakhs, to women, saying, here's a coupon you will encash. When you vote for us and we come to power, you will encash this for rupees 1 lakh paid to you because you're a woman. Every year, for free, for doing nothing. So actually in those places where Congress representative got elected, these women came with those coupons and they were thrown away from the party headquarters. Just to tell you how they literally bought votes. Now, had the Supreme Court had any good intention here, they would have pointed this out and corrected for it. Because any kind of, this is against the law. To pay people by any form of promises of paying back for getting elected is against the law. But Supreme Court of course did nothing, protected all these statements. In Karnataka they offered free bus to all women, and in the Congress manifesto they made very interesting statements. I put a link about 7 things which have been pointed out as dangerous. One of these was to protect Muslim interests for beef consumption and love jihad. Love jihad, as you know, is a very problematic situation in India, where some of the Muslims will take Hindu names, get involved with a Hindu girl and get her involved emotionally and then convert her. And among them it's like a mark that they have made for going to heaven and so on. Now a lot of the media says this is not true, and that's the leftist controlled media. If you look at the alternate media, where so many thousands of cases literally all over the country are happening, not just in India, it's happening in the UK and other countries also, and it's extremely dangerous. And so there were certain elements in their manifesto which promised to protect such things. And one of the very interesting phrases in the Congress manifesto was, bail is the rule, jail is an exception. And they said they will pass a law to make this the case. So even when somebody is arrested for a terrorist activity, he will be given bail, because that should be the rule. What is interesting is recently the Chief Justice of India made this observation: bail is the rule, jail is an exception. Now they've got the whole thing. They didn't come to power, they didn't change the law, but they, through the Chief Justice, basically enforced one of these policies. Now, why is this important? Because effectively, anybody who becomes now as a gunda, as part of the toolkit, starts doing nefarious things, including harming people or killing people, if they are arrested currently, well, they go to jail. But at that point, the law would have said, or now the Supreme Court has ordered, that bail is the rule. So someone will give money and you'll be let out on bail. Now, this is a pattern which is part of the toolkit, and it has been happening in large numbers in the United States, in New York City, in New York State, as well as in California State, where people who have been arrested for rape, for murder, etc., because they are illegal immigrants, and I'm making that phrase very clear, they are illegally in the country, they walked across the border, they are not legal immigrants, and there's an important distinction, and Trump makes this distinction. Someone who comes into the US through legal process, you invite them. It's a country of immigrants. Illegal immigrant is someone who walks across the border and has sometimes a criminal past, would never have passed through the legal immigration process because they would eliminate people with a criminal past. These people come in, often they are let out from jails in other countries, they come in, they commit crimes, rapes and murders, and then there's a whole machinery which takes them out on bail and they recommit the crime. And there are cases, and for this you will have to really look not at mainstream media, but look at the Gateway Pundit. You'll find a lot of examples documented there where people have committed rapes 3 or 4 times, each time let out on bail. Now, this is one of the toolkit formulas for creating civil unrest, so that criminals do not stay in jail, and it is done with a deliberately false representation of humanity, but it's a false sense of humanity. And now, without coming to power, the Congress has rammed this through the Chief Justice. We're going to look at some of this connection with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and so on, and other justices, but I'll come to that later. So at the same time, while Rahul is doing this, we have the Manipur religious violence, where Christian converted tribes were attacking Hindu tribes to drive them out from their state, to create what is called ethnic cleansing. Same thing which happened in Jammu and Kashmir earlier. Hindus were driven out from the Kashmir region, and we have, at that point, it was 400,000 Hindus who were refugees within their own country. To this day, they have stayed in near Delhi area, where they were given plots, and now it's already second generation. They will never go back. Ethnic cleansing effectively was successful. Similar thing happening in Manipur, and while this violence was happening, again, the same statements from the Congress or Rahul, never a statement for the Hindus, and similarly the media also played that game, similar to what happened in Bangladesh. When Rahul was travelling across states, he was attempting to cross every single state. Very conveniently, he skips Arunachal Pradesh. Now, this is a very important point. You have to understand why it happened, and I've put a link about this, which is an observation made by one of the eminent jurists by the name of Jethmalani. I think he must be the son of the famous Jethmalani, but I don't know. But he makes this observation that Rahul skipped Arunachal Pradesh, and why? Because just before that, China had declared Arunachal Pradesh, of course they've been declaring it for decades now, that it's part of China, but just before that they had declared names of many cities and areas in Arunachal Pradesh renamed in Chinese, because it's their country, it's their territory. So on that basis, Rahul skips Arunachal Pradesh, because if he goes there, he will be going against the Chinese interest. And this is not an exaggeration. The fact is that in the year 2008, when Congress party was in power, the Congress party, INC, entered into a memorandum of understanding with the Chinese Communist Party. Now, one party of India enters into a secret memorandum of understanding with the party of another country which is a totalitarian state. Okay, it's not even a democratically elected party. They make an agreement to protect Chinese interests within India and to represent Chinese interests within India. So among them, it is said, now since that agreement is still secret, but people talk, it is said that one of the things that the Congress party agreed was that they would agree to hand over Arunachal Pradesh or not dispute China's claim on Arunachal Pradesh. Now that being the case, Rahul Gandhi carefully avoids going into Arunachal Pradesh. Now I'm pointing all this out to you so that you understand what's really happening, which the media does not tell you. And at the same time, now you must understand all these things are happening increasingly as you are approaching the election date. All these things are happening parallelly. And the scope of the confusion you must fully appreciate. What it does, and this is part of the leftist mind control framework, give you so much contradictory data or overwhelming you with so much detailed information but with a negative messaging, common messaging, that you stop thinking, you stop analyzing. And what you say is, okay, just tell me what's the sum of it. So if you see, for example, in the Indian history books which were written by leftists, that names and dates and names and dates and names and dates, all of the Mughal period. So you have the impression India was only ruled by Mughals. And you're supposed to learn all of those by heart. So you're cramming your mind with useless information. And at some point you just numb yourself and say, okay, who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, just tell me. I don't even want to know the rest. I don't want to analyze. This was the same game they played during the COVID lockdowns, when they told you first, oh, the virus does not spread in the air. Oh, it spreads, but it only spreads in exceptional situations. Oh, it does not spread by contact. Oh, but it spreads with contact. And they kept giving you contradictory information coming at the same time from different sources. So at some point the mind stops thinking and says, okay, just tell me what I should do. Put on the masks. Okay, thank you. I put on the masks. You've stopped analyzing. You've stopped questioning how this contradictory information can be given to you. When they told you the vaccines will prevent you from getting the disease, this was the promise given everywhere from WHO through by all the presidents and prime ministers of all the countries. Vaccines, we promise you, they are safe and effective, and you will never get COVID once you have the vaccine. And then they said, yes, but you will get COVID, but you will not die from it. Oh yes, then they said, oh, but you might die from it, but only in extreme cases. And even the vaccine producers first said 100% effective. There's a very interesting video of how over 6 months that 100% came down to 94%, 86%, 72%, down, kept rolling down until it was something like, 30, 40% and even lower. But the idea is overwhelm you with negative messaging. So you stop thinking and just say, oh, something is wrong, and you accept. Now, why is this important? I'm connecting it to Anuradha's observation that there is a dip in the energy, a defeatist mentality seems to be creeping. And I've deliberately kept the question exactly as it is because that was the mood during and post-elections. Confusion and a defeatist mentality. And I'm showing you how it was created. So, Rahul Gandhi skips Arunachal Pradesh because it serves Chinese interests and their understanding with China. At the same time, there is a US company which specializes in sinking stock markets. So, and they declare on their website that their mission is basically to go against trends and to what is called in the stock market bear run. They will bet on the stock market crashing and they will spread stories to make it crash. So they attacked Adani companies. As it turned out subsequently, 2 months later, all of their claims were false. But when they attacked, they were aiming to short the Adani stock and they would buy low and then make money in the process. But why Adani? Because Adani was seen to be friendly to the ruling party BJP, friendly to the Modi, at least the media told us so. And it was an attack on the stock market. As long as the stock market was high, Modi's image was high. So if you sank the stock market with a panic sell, then it would be blamed on Modi, see what a mess he has made and so on. And it would be linked to Adani's, which were supposedly linked to Modi. So, and again, I have to explain how that works. You see, every time a US president travels to any country, he carries with him representatives of all the business interests who will make the deals. And he's there to sign, to promote his country's business interests to make deals. And initially in India, all the previous prime ministers used to take a bunch of media personnel, no businessmen. And the media personnel would sing glowing praises of the prime minister. And this was the general strategy which was used by the Congress. When Modi came to power, he threw out all the media personnel. He said, if you want, you can travel on your own. Instead, he started taking businessmen because he wanted India's business to grow and benefit from the engagements with other countries. So this was the strategy. He shifted it, and among them, obviously, Adani was one of those, and many others. They've all benefited. So you'll see often the Congress will attack all these big names of businesses who have benefited because Modi has engaged with other countries to strengthen Indian businesses. So now they will say, see, Modi is supporting the big businessmen and not the poor man. No, that's not true. That's not how it works. So again, this Hindenburg attack is happening to sink the stock markets. And you have in the middle of this the Ram Temple inauguration. Now this was fascinating because it also brought together regional countries. It strengthened the SAARC region, except for Pakistan and Bangladesh. Even Bangladesh was moderate at that point. And you had actually representatives from Nepal, Sri Lanka, Thailand sending gifts and so on, because they all have deep connections with Rama. And at that time, you have the US media attack on the Ram temple with fake news. They showed a picture of the half constructed temple and said, this is a huge setback for Modi. I am tempted to actually quote from that. It is so weird. It is, the fake news is humiliating shock for Narendra Modi's mega hyped vanity project. So Ram temple is presented as a vanity project of Modi. And for those of you who will recall, please look at the discussion we had on how important this temple is, what it represents. We had this discussion just before the temple was inaugurated. You will see it in the evening series. But I'm just showing you how all these interests which were against India were upset about the temple. And it was a very strong point. Naturally, Modi also had his talk go up in the public image, because the fact is, and I've documented there, he worked for this for 40 years. It's not like he's prime minister and says, okay, now that there's a temple inauguration, I'll be there. He actually worked for it for 40 years. And so for him, it was a personal fulfillment of having the temple taking place. But at the same time, he inaugurates also a temple in the middle of the UAE, in Abu Dhabi. There's a Hindu temple for the first time in, well, history, we could say perhaps. And all these things are happening, which are also positive for India at that time. And the Tamil Nadu government, Karnataka governments, which are inimical to even the Hindu the tradition, blocked the live webcast or broadcast of the temple inauguration, prevented Hindu temples within their control from having special pujas or aartis on that day. And this is so disgusting to see. And you must understand why the temple was so important and a political issue. Because for the ideology that wants to break India, the one uniting feature of India which holds it together is the Hindu tradition, which is the only tradition that says we are inviting all values, all approaches towards God equally, always towards God. And unlike other traditions, which is my way is the only way and it is the only right way. So if, as long as the Hindu tradition is strong, India is united. If you can break the Hindu tradition, you break India. Basically, that's the goal. So, at the same time, 2 months before elections, the Supreme Court steps in and starts a whole series of attacks on the government, on the Hindu tradition, on Indian values, on the election procedures, in every way possible. And the Supreme Court Chief Justice is on the front page every single day on statements. Now, this has never happened before or after. Why is the Supreme Court statement or Chief Justice's statement appearing as headline on every newspaper every day for a month or two? And that's because in the toolkit, he was being set up, propped up as the man who would be the decider for replacing Narendra Modi. So what you see happened in Bangladesh, where they put Yunus as the front man, the face, Nobel laureate in the field of economics. He got an award for having run a bank which was doing micro-lending. It's no big deal. Micro-lending is not a new invention. He just ran a successful operation of micro-lending and he was given an award of Nobel Prize. Not even for thoughts or intelligence of any special insight. And because you have propped up an image, now this person becomes a reference and a convenient cover for the army takeover. So something in India, similarly in the toolkit, they needed a propped up face who would be, for the international arena, the focal point to go to when Modi is toppled or BJP is toppled. And this was the Chief Justice being promoted in this way. And you will see everywhere in the media his name. And he was making statements left and right about how India should be run and how governments are not doing what they should be doing and what they should do. Until finally you had the ruling party making statements, look, please respect the line of separation of the different elements of the democracy. Supreme Court's job is to interpret the law, not to make the law. And so there was some restraint, but it did not change in the media. So I'm going to show you quite a few things which happened. So 2 months before elections, Supreme Court cancels the electoral bond scheme. Now the electoral bond scheme was started some 7 years before and was used as a way to remove black money from the elections. Otherwise, before that, every company had to give cash to the ruling party goons, whoever they were, in your state or in the center. I know this for a fact because going back nearly now 30 years, I was in touch with some of my friends who were in business, and he just told me a story. He said one day these goons from, I won't say which party, but it was a state party, and you can guess where it would be, nearby. They came to me and with the inspector of factories and said, give us so many lakhs of rupees right now in cash for the party. Of course. Otherwise, the inspector of factories will shut down your factory. I said, you should have fought back. You should have gone to court. He said, if you go to court, they will keep you shut for the next 10 years. You'll be sunk. So at that point, you just pay money. It's basically someone putting a gun to your head and say, give your cash. And this was the norm in India. And what happened was, in the process, every business gave money to all sides. Slightly more, slightly less, but they kept it secret how much they actually gave. But the impression they had to create was they gave to both sides, so they stayed in the good books and they were not attacked. What Modi did was, he said, okay, you want transparency? And he created these bonds where any company could buy the bonds and then gift the bond to any party they wanted. The party would not know from which company it came. The company would not have to convert their earnings into cash. It would be treated, the money would be taken from their actual earnings, so they didn't have to convert cash. He was eliminating cash economy and corruption. This has gone on for 6 or 7 years, and suddenly the Supreme Court wakes up 2 months before election, cancels the bond scheme, says it is unconstitutional, forces the, I think it was Reserve Bank of India or State Bank of India, to release the donors list and how much money was paid to whom by whom. Now this list itself was kept secret. Even the ruling party didn't have access to it. And what is interesting is it took a while even for them to be able to put together, because they had created a mechanism to separate the information from one side to the other. And the hope was for them to prove that the BJP had received lots of money and in return for benefits. So Supreme Court orders this. When the list is actually released, it turns out that the opposition received much more money if you go on a per member of parliament level. And the bulk of the state opposition leaders had received lots of money and so on. So the moment this information came up, the media went silent. Till then, they were hammering away at Modi, saying corruption in BJP, using electoral bond scheme, which is the worst corruption possible. Now, Rahul Gandhi is on record saying this is the worst corruption, the greatest scam in the history of India. But the moment elections are over, they all go to sleep. Nobody's talking about it anymore. Nobody's talking about this as corruption. So you must understand, the trick is to create before elections a mood of fear, of doubt, of confusion. Simply throw so much mud that common man stops thinking and says, oh, there must be something wrong. Okay? But this is just the beginning. Notice how the media goes silent. And you must know media is not your friend. They are lying to you. They are paid puppets of interests. At the same time, there is the farmers' protest number 2. Remember, the first protest was more than a year ago when Modi finally withdrew those 3 bills that were going to be passed. He just withdrew them and then said, finally, let each state do what it wants. Now this farmer protest came up. They wanted to raise MSP, the minimum purchase price for the crops. They wanted to raise it. I've spoken about it before, so I don't go into detail. But the moment Modi said, okay, let's discuss and we will agree to all of your terms, they shifted the focus. And then now I read from the actual newspaper article. They changed their demands. Apart from drafting a law on MSP, the protesting farmers have been demanding that India should quit the World Trade Organization, halt trade agreements with other nations, and monthly pension of rupees 10,000 to farmers who attain the age of 60 years, among others. Now, obviously, by raising the bar to a level which is ridiculously stupid and impossible, suddenly you're saying you must stop all agreements with all other nations. Otherwise, we will continue to agitate. They are ensuring that they cannot be stopped from agitating. You must understand the target is not about farmers' needs. The target is creating the image of an agitation, keeping the agitation alive, so that when finally the electoral results come, you have an agitation in place now to turn against Modi if he has won with a strong majority. This is what happened with Bangladesh. They had an agitation first on what was something about reservations. Then it became, now remove this leader, now demand this, now demand that, and the whole thing was a very different presentation. Same story with the farmers' agitation. And you must understand the toolkit was in full operation before, during, and after the election. How it has changed, we will look at. Among the things which they targeted, it's very interesting. They had stored rations for up to 6 months for their insurgency operations. I put a link about that. It's an article which documents this. They had set up in centers all across the country, and particularly in the Punjab, Haryana region, around surrounding Delhi particularly, that stocked up rations for 6 months. So that means in January they were planning for a long-term sustained struggle of so-called farmers. They had more than 2,000 vehicles already in place, and including 1,500 tractors, all aligned to be able to stop, block roads from going in and out of Delhi. So the goal would have been, had Modi won with an overwhelming majority, they would have declared that there was corruption and that the electronic voting machines were hacked, and now we want a regime change. We will replace Modi because he's a tyrant and he has hacked the elections. They would have surrounded Delhi with their trucks. They would have prevented anything going in and out, and so on. Same what you see in Bangladesh. All this was in place already. And if you see, there's another link I've put where the media is covering the farmers' agitation, and the cameraman widens the angle to show farmer throwing stones at the police. And the person who is the media reporter who's controlling the cameraman says, no, don't show the farmer throwing stones. Why? Because the media wanted to push forward an impression that the police was attacking farmers for no good reason. So remember what happened in Bangladesh, I told you, and what happened earlier in also Syria, where from the agitators they will attack the police. When the police strikes back, that's when the video camera comes on. They'll say, see, police attacked. And police did it on orders of Sheikh Hasina or PM Modi or whoever it is they want to topple. So the cameraman has to be careful. Don't turn the camera to the agitators who are triggering the reaction. And this is one of the links I've placed there. And it was found that they had actually documents among them to target Prime Minister's house and the Home Minister's house. So Modi and Amit Shah, Narendra Modi and Amit Shah were the two primary targets. Sheikh Hasina in this case, here they had two targets. And if you see across the media, these two names have been put together again and again. Why? Because these two, the cabal has found they cannot buy out, then they cannot convert. All else in the media, as you go down, you can threaten, you can push, you can bully, but these two are uncompromising. So yes, of course, they have had to compromise, but for other reasons, and that's a different story. But they cannot be compromised to sell out on national interest. And so this was a point where removing these two is critical in the larger agenda for India, for the toolkit objectives in India. So what you saw at the same time, remember all this is happening parallelly. In the media is this messaging that electronic voting machines are hackable by Modi. So Rahul Gandhi makes all these statements that the EVMs are hacked, we can hack them, we will prove to you, we have all the proof, we have all the evidence. Interestingly, once the elections are over, there is no question about hacking or proof. All that has vanished. Why? Because the elections served their interests. And how it was done, that also I will come to shortly. But understand the point. Before elections, when they expected to lose badly, they had to create these this idea. And you had the same thing echoing in the international press. And again, they also went silent after elections. Had they genuinely believed it, they would have said, okay, now that there is a change in elections, remove those EVMs. Go back to paper ballots. That was Congress had promised that. To go back to paper ballots because there you can hack more easily. EVMs you couldn't hack. So Supreme Court takes up the EVM case, starts demanding daily discussions, and just before elections. So it's not even that you're giving enough time to prove something. The idea is precisely you don't want enough time to prove something, you just want the doubt to remain. And the Supreme Court plays fully into this. At the same time, Justice K. Joseph, Supreme Court judge, objects to Supreme Court motto being Yato Dharmas Tato Jayah. This is a phrase from in Sanskrit which states that wherever there is truth, there is victory. Now this is the motto of the Supreme Court. And here is a sitting Supreme Court judge who says this should not be there. And the same judge has actually stated that the Catholic Church is the equivalent of a preamble to Constitution. So here is an ideology of a Supreme Court judge where he places the ideology of his religion higher than the constitutional value, demands that a Sanskrit phrase which actually says where there is truth, there is justice, where there is victory. He wants that removed. Why? Because it's in Sanskrit. Because it does not fit into his religious indoctrination. Now you must understand, none of this is happening by chance. It's all happening at the same time because they are activating religious identities. Remember the examples I gave earlier of promises made in the Congress manifesto which were for reservations of various castes and groups and religious groups. You are activating these identities. By activating identities and offering them protection or benefits, you are getting their vote. This is the game. So all this is intentional and carefully timed. At the same time, that's when Justice Gawai says, without the identity, I wouldn't be a Supreme Court judge today. And I really, really find that extremely troubling. That means you have set aside deliberately the place of competence. Now it becomes a caste identity by which you reach a position of power, and the whole scramble for caste is really about controlling power. So it tells you how serious it is, but it's not finished. Remember, Supreme Court is meant to be now for the toolkit, the focal point for toppling the government. When government is toppled, who takes the place, who decides, who will stand like Yunus or the army chief there to say, I will ensure you will have proper justice. Well, it was going to be the Supreme Court and the Chief Justice and the people around. So that's the toolkit at least. I'm not saying they are conscious of it or not. That's for you to decide. I will not comment because these things are sensitive. At the same time, the Supreme Court takes up a complaint from the Indian Medical Association against Ayurveda and against Baba Ramdev. If you remember, that was a huge joke which was taking place, but a sad joke. That they were attacking Baba Ramdev, demanding that he withdraw various products, demanding that he stop criticizing allopathy and so on. But what is IMA? I put a link there which describes IMA is actually not a government body. It's a private institution registered which tries to become the representative for all of allopathy in India. And the head of the IMA, just a few years back, had declared during COVID that COVID was the perfect opportunity to convert India to Christianity. This is the chief of IMA stating that his vehicle IMA is going to be used for conversion to Christianity across India, and COVID is the perfect opportunity. So you must understand, IMA does not represent Indic values. It does not represent the good of India. It represents the religious control on the doctors and medical system of allopathy in India. Second point you must make, it's not just a private body, it's promoting specific multinational brands of toothpaste, soft drinks, etc. Again, I've put a few links. So why is Indian Medical Association, which is not a government but a private body, actually promoting soft drinks as if they are health drinks? They were promoting baby food which had very high levels of sugar, which would be harmful to the baby. They're promoting toothpaste, and of course there's a quid pro quo. They are getting benefits. In what form we do not know, and I'm not going to get into that. But it is done for benefits. So you can see IMA actually represented multinational interests which are anti-national interest, because multinational is always dominating national interest. And at that point when they took up Ayurveda, and Baba Ramdev, who represented now, became effectively the face for Ayurveda in India, they demanded, this is so sad to see, they demanded 4 times an apology. The first time they demanded an apology, well, normally you say the lawyer is representing you. That's what they keep claiming. So the lawyer conveys the apology on behalf of whatever, Ramdev or the company. Then they demand that Ramdev appear himself and make the apology, just to humiliate him. Now remember, the whole game of the courts and the justice system is the common man is not supposed to know law, so you have a lawyer representing you. Even in their language, a lawyer in the Supreme Court or even in other courts will say, Your Honor, I am, and speaking on behalf of the person who is representing, I am, and he is that person, and this is my problem, etc. So you're not supposed to call the original person because your lawyer is representing you, just to humiliate the man and to convey a message in the public of humiliation. So they summon him and make him apologize. That's not enough. The body of judges now demands that they put that apology in writing in the newspaper. Okay, so Ramdev's company puts full advertisements across all the newspapers as ordered by the court. Then again they are summoned and they are told, sorry, that's not enough. It was too small. You must now put the same ad all over again in larger type and larger space. So 4 times they had to apologize. And I'm sorry to say this is so disgusting. The Supreme Court Justice says at that point, we will rip you apart. I put a link to that. It is so disturbing. It was so disturbing even to have this in the national headlines that some of the ex-judges began to comment on this, saying this is not acceptable in a Supreme Court or in any court for that matter. We will rip you apart is the threat he gives to Ramdev. Who is this man? Who are these judges? I will not say, and I will simply say there were ideological interests involved. And why was this being done? And all this is happening in parallel. Ayurveda, the Hindu psyche, the values which Ayurveda are representing, and particularly the Baba Ramdev, whose Ayurvedic products have actually reduced the sales of multinational products. They have displaced them severely, caused them greater losses. That needs to be set right. That's the larger game. Remember, the groups that want to break India or take over India, they're ideological, they're religious, but more than anything else, it's about power and control and profit. So it includes also the multinationals who just want their profit. They want India to be completely controlled by their multinational brands and owned by their multinational brands. That's it. Nothing local. And Ayurveda is one of the greatest threats, because when it's effective, especially in India today, when people practice it, the sales dramatically drop. When Baba Ramdev was speaking out against soft drinks openly, he would say use it as a toilet cleaning liquid. The sales of those soft drinks had dropped so much that there were complaints from the multinational headquarters about this. So they had to put him in his place, and one of the key persons who was going around on the ground level speaking against allopathic products actually was killed in mysterious circumstances, and I don't remember his name right now, but many of you would know. And then Supreme Court orders the state government to cancel 14 products which Ramdev was selling at that point. There are many more products, but 14 of them, which were the biggest threat at that point, because they were controlling blood pressure and many other things, even they were treating diabetes, etc. Those were eliminated and their license withdrawn. And of course, naturally, there's an equivalent boost in the sales of allopathic drugs. Now, all this is happening in the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court has become the center for all the drama against Modi, against the strength of the values which this election is representing, which includes also the traditional values of Indian civilization. And at that point, Raghuram Rajan, who is the ex-RBI governor, comes out with a statement giving a warning about the hype on India's growth story. He says, do not believe the hype. Why? What's the point? In other words, don't believe that Modi has brought India onto such a strong path of growth. Don't believe. That's all he says. And he says it's not possible. We have the same thing happening when Trump was standing for elections in 2016, and Obama was saying, it's not possible. The economy, that's the condition of the world. It has to keep sinking and it will sink. And Trump said, no, I will raise it. And Obama said, how will you do that? Will you just wave a magic wand? It's not possible. It's impossible, he said that. Trump actually did it within 2 years. But just to show you that all these interests, which are puppets for the cabal, are activated at the same time. At the same time, you see in the north region of India, I think it is in Leh region, there is this fellow called Sonam Wangchuk. He has been promoted as a award winner. He's been promoted as if a movie was made around his intelligence, etc. He goes on a fast, demanding what? Again, very silly things. He wants that region to be declared a state and not a union territory and things like that. For what? What's the big deal? Why do you have to go on a fast? And as he does the fast, and there are statements he's making, and he abuses Rama and Sita as a way of targeting Modi government. And again, that shows you something in the mentality. And all these award winners, especially when they've received awards from the West, you must understand they become puppets in the toolkit operation. So all this is happening at the same time. At the same time, the Aam Aadmi Party, which, as you know, Kejriwal we have spoken of before, is one of the puppets from the cabal. I've given the full story earlier, I won't repeat. They are promoting an image of a Jagannath Yatra crowd as if it's a crowd of the AAP supporters. So remember, all this is about creating impressions. They don't care if it's true or not. It's an impression. Just before election, you have an impression, you vote. After that, they dump you. They don't care what you do. Now, while this was happening, interestingly, because Modi government had already released the enforcement directorate, yes, somebody has put a, yes, Dhulia is saying you're speaking of Rajiv Dikshit. Yes, Rajiv Dikshit was working. He was poisoned and the blame was put on Baba Ramdev, Vaibhav says. I don't know the details. But yes, he was going around village to village and helping people recover their traditional Ayurvedic knowledge for regaining their health. And it was affecting the multinational sales. I have shared with you before, once I was in a conference where somebody was putting up statistics. And I was shocked to see, this is a conference now 10, 15 years ago, they were showing statistics going back 35 years of interior villages, the most far villages, of how many % use toothpaste, how many use toothbrush, and why they use, why they don't use. They had done a full survey. And these are multinational interests. And this person who was doing this was actually part of a religious conversion group. So the religious conversion agenda and the multinational agenda are aligned in certain respects, you see. So it's a complicated thing. That's why I'm just giving you the data. It's for you to then understand how complex this whole thing is. Now, at this point, Narendra Modi had released the enforcement directorate and told them, go after anyone. And all the big names, do not fear. Because earlier, enforcement directorate was the tool of the ruling party. They would use it to attack their opposition and things like that. Narendra Modi said, even if it's a BJP member of parliament, you don't care. You catch anybody who's committing crimes and go for the big fish straight away. So they were going after all the big ones, including, as it turned out, there was this whole operation which the Aam Aadmi Party in Delhi had done. They had done a deal for sale of liquor, and they had removed certain controls so that they could have better profits. And the whole thing had been exposed. 2 of their colleagues had been put in jail. And Delhi Chief Minister, finally, Arvind Kejriwal himself the evidence was put. Now what happened is, when you go for a Chief Minister, the Supreme Court would have shot it down. They would have said this is political. So the enforcement directorate took 1.5 years to build all the documentation. They had some 500 pages and 500 witnesses, etc. They put everything together. On that basis, when he was arrested and the Supreme Court summoned the ED and tried to get Kejriwal free, the evidence was so overwhelming they could not. So what happened? This is the interesting thing. Kejriwal said, by preventing me from campaigning during elections, you are trespassing on my constitutional rights. So the impression that the media gave to you was that he needed to stand for elections, and by arresting him, the ED was preventing him from standing for elections. No, that was not the case. He was not standing for elections. He wanted to go and campaign for others of his party. Now, this is the first time in the history the law was twisted around by the Supreme Court, and Kejriwal was given permission, while all the evidence was against him, and they had to accept that he had to be jailed. They gave him interim bail, temporary bail, to go and campaign because it was his right to campaign for others, interestingly. And when the elections were over, he would come back to jail and go back into jail. What an extraordinary joke the Supreme Court has made on the nature of our law. You see, it is your right, constitutional right, to go and campaign for others. How stupid is that? When you're a criminal about to enter jail in a way that the Supreme Court couldn't prevent, because the thing was so overwhelming. Then comes the joke. So media made a big deal about, oh, it was Modi who was suppressing his opponent because he was afraid. No, it was not the case. When he campaigns, he comes back, he goes back into jail, not a squeak from the media. They didn't even tell you he went back to jail. He was in jail all these months, and more recently, he and others were released. And what was the basis for the release? The same Supreme Court declared, and I don't remember, it was one of his colleagues who was released, and Supreme Court declared, there are more than 500 witnesses. How can you ever have the case completed soon enough? So, because it's going to take so long, we have to give them interim bail. Look at the joke. Had you had 5 witnesses, they would have said that's not enough evidence to put you, and bail would be given. Now that you have 500, that's too much evidence, so it's going to take too long. Because it will take too long, you should be allowed to have bail. And that's when the Supreme Court made this observation that the rule should be bail and jail should be the exception, exactly taken from the Congress Party's manifesto. I'm just showing you this to make clear that there is a one-to-one correspondence in the agenda, even in the statements of the agenda, across political parties and across the judiciary at the highest levels of the Supreme Court. Then comes something else. Same Supreme Court Chief Justice makes a comment. He orders the CBI to ignore criminals. I'm not joking. I've put a link there. And I'm quoting exactly. It says, India's premier investigative agencies are stretched too thin and advise them to focus solely on cases involving national security and economic offences against the nation. In other words, don't arrest Kejriwal because he's an economic offence within the nation. Focus on economic offences from outside the country into India and involving national security, but the crimes within India, please ignore. You are stretched too thin, and this is his compassionate advice. Can you imagine how stupid this is? What a joke this is. And this is coming from the highest positions of the legal system. And media laps it up, promotes this thinking. And you must understand what is happening behind this is to set the precedent, because law goes by precedent, that all those who will be arrested, because Modi has started this process, and as you know, just before election, 6 months before, one after another, chief ministers were being arrested for having 200 or 300 crores in cash within their farmhouse, within their toilets, within their whatever. It was happening all over the country. They were all scared because their whole mechanism of buying out votes, giving cash, was being affected. And ED was doing a brilliant job. That's when Chief Justice says, do not do this. Focus on external threats, economic offences from outside India. You are too busy, you are too stretched thin. Don't take up this, there is too much to do here. Do you understand what that means? And I'm restating this for the meaning that it has. The words are cleverly worded, but you can see the message is stop doing this. And once a precedent is set in future, these things would be used as a precedent. Oh, so-and-so was given bail, even though there was 500 witnesses of evidence against him. So now in future, all others should get bail immediately. And as a result, none of these people who have been committing crimes for decades, they have been in politics only to loot the nation. None of these people will ever go to jail because of this reason. And then what happens? While all this is happening, obviously somewhere there are people who are thinking, something is wrong, this is not normal. And then suddenly you have a letter of 600 lawyers writing to the Chief Justice of India. So again, 600 lawyers don't just come together overnight. There is an activation of a control system of toolkits. So the activation takes place, 600 lawyers sign overnight. They write to the Chief Justice saying that there is, I quote, a vested interest group is trying to put pressure, I'm quoting from the news item, a vested interest group is trying to put pressure on the judiciary and defame courts, especially in cases of corruption involving politicians. 600 lawyers are saying that too many politicians are being arrested, and that's giving a bad name to the courts, and the court is being put under pressure, and writing to Chief Justice to ask for what? But the impression created is that Modi government is somehow going after politicians. He is a tyrant. He is dominating. In the name of anti-corruption drive, he is eliminating his political opposition because he is afraid of them. These were the headlines and messages coming within India and outside India. Why? So that when Modi came to power with an overwhelming majority, they would say, see, that's because he arrested all these people, because he foisted cases against them, because he put them in jail. Here is a tyrant who must be removed because he is against democracy. This was the toolkit game plan, but it's not over. They started another story. Congress started and all the other opposition parties took over. They created this Indie Alliance and they called themselves Indie and Alliance. So they started saying that Modi is going to change the constitution to put religious minorities and reservations at a disadvantage, and that's why he is asking for an overwhelming majority, because he wants to change the constitution. Modi came out saying no such thing. Media did not amplify that. They continued for several weeks with this false messaging. So again, I'm telling you, media blatantly lies. Media is fully aligned to the opposition and toolkit interests, and they have no interest in the national well-being. They continued to lie even after Modi denied that there was any such intention. So, and then there was this whole controversy which came around where finally some of the BJP pointed out how Congress was actually taking religious positions which were against national interest. They quoted Manmohan Singh. In 2006, Manmohan Singh declared publicly that, and I quote exactly, Muslims have first claim on India's resources. And I remember at that time seeing this in the headlines. We were still getting newspapers at that time. And it was so sad to see, because not one opposition party dared to speak up against this. On the basis of a religion, you are now granting a religious group first right over national resources. And this was the most divisive statement ever made by an Indian Prime Minister, as far as I'm aware. Blatantly. Others have made statements not as blatant, but. And so all this came up, which Congress denied, the media denied. Actually, the facts were it was true, and I've given the link about this. So all this is to give you a background of how a mood was created and the toolkit was set in place. Now, remember, all this activation is in place and the elections start. It went through, I believe, 4 phases, or several phases. First phase, second phase, it was overwhelmingly obvious that the BJP was coming to power. Third phase, fourth phase, things changed. What happened? So while all this is happening, there's the programming of the negative messaging, and at the same time, the social media is promoting these images and these messages. Any of you who have watched at that point any of the social media, remember, all social media is under control of the United States government. China very intelligently separated itself from the American social media and created its own social media equivalent for everything, which was under control of the CCP, Chinese Communist Party, but so that they controlled it. But in India, there's nothing like this. In fact, whatever we had, even as an email, which was VSNL owned by the government, they sold it off, privatized. Remember, that was the catchphrase at that time. So, sold it off and it went into private hands and the whole thing was lost. So today, we are all of our email is still spied upon by the NSA, United States government, etc., because you're using Google or others which are US owned. So not only they are monitoring you, they know exactly who you will vote for, what your beliefs are. They then pump you with references, information, which is intended to shift your thinking. The practical result of all this was, and that's what I said earlier, you are confused. Your mind goes numb. And either you don't act or you are swayed in the moment. Now, I know many people, and this is coming from completely independent directions, many people who said they did not vote at all. And when asked why, they were confused, as if in a hypnosis. Why didn't you vote? Just like that. You remember how the hypnosis works. It was a hypnosis. done through the MK Ultra technology, through social media. And then one of them, or a few actually, said this: I didn't know what to do. I was confused. I didn't know what to do. Statements to this kind. And so I didn't do anything. And this was part of the game. The result was, as it seemed, the group that would have voted for Modi dropped by, I don't know, 5 or 10%. And that's enough to swing. And the result was, just on that edge, the BJP came to power but lost several seats. And again, the media made a big deal about how they lost the seat in which Ayodhya was. And they said, oh, it's a negative vote against Modi by Hindus. No, it was not. Because there is no actual member of parliament from Ayodhya. It's shared across 4 districts, 4 regions. And 4 regions, 3 of them are Muslim majority. So the whole thing was misrepresented in the media to deliberately make you feel that it was a vote against Modi by the Hindus. These were all lies. It was not the case. But this is how the whole technology works of the toolkit. Now, as it turned out, I have to come to the last part. So all this is happening, the 3rd and 4th phase, and then there's a period of 4 days before they will announce simultaneously on one day all the actual election results. The night before the election results are announced, there was a group of judges, ex-judges and existing judges, who wrote a letter to the Chief Justice of India saying, you must take action because of the hacking of the electronic voting machines. If any evidence is found of hacking, you must take action. Now, I'm putting this last part. Unfortunately, I didn't have the time today to give you the link, but I've saved the link. I'm giving you this last part as the actual point where the toolkit would have been activated. Everything was in place. The day the election results were announced, had Modi actually won an overwhelming majority and did not need any dependence on other parties, they would have said electronic voting machines have been hacked. All the preparation has been built up. Chief Justice is there. He would have summoned certain things. The evidence would have been produced, or the doubt would have been created, and the whole process would have begun. You would have had, like in Bangladesh, the demonstrations. Your 2,000 tractors would block Delhi, and in other states similarly, where you have all these groups activated, they would all go on a spree. They would attack the police, and the chain which would follow, inevitably. All that was in place. And the last part, the key, the trigger, was this letter by the judges. And I'm going to put this as a suggestion. All those who signed that letter, remember, are controlled puppets of the cabal. As I've said before, sometimes it is done in a subtle way, sometimes it is done indirectly, sometimes it is done directly. Some of them are blackmailed, some of them are under financial or other pressure, some of them are giving back. They may not even understand that they're a puppet in a larger machinery. They may think, oh, I'm just signing a letter, what's the big deal? But all this was in place. And you must understand how serious this is. India was on the brink of a classic regime change operation, toolkit operation, as you saw in Bangladesh, which was, of course, much more coarse. India would have been less coarse, but still all the international media was already lined up with all the keywords in place. As it turned out, the intervention through social media, and particularly through what I call the hypnosis through the media, was so effective that those 5 or 10% who did not vote allowed for a certain balance in the opposition to return, where everybody, including the Congress party, expected a complete rout. They were able to turn around with combination of the promises they made, etc. Particularly, as it turned out in the previous election, they did an analysis. All the Muslim women voted for Modi because he actually worked for their emancipation by removing triple talaq and other things, and bringing education for women, etc. And many Muslims were also happy with this. So Congress targeted the Muslim women in particular with those promissory notes saying, come back and we will give you 1 lakh per year, etc. So there was a very targeted intervention on a ground level. All those things of dividing along religious and caste lines, all those things had activated social media hypnosis. All that simultaneously was enough to make just enough tilt that instead of having complete rout, some of them were able to partially bounce back. Now, this is very important to understand. Effectively, the opposition still lost, and I'll explain how. Where earlier all the opposition parties were fighting independently and still Modi defeated them. This time they had all ganged up and become one big Indie alliance. So effectively, although they won, they did not win with the same kind of support they had before. It was done by consolidation of votes which would have been divided across the opposition and with lies. And all these came together to have this result. And now you must understand they are desperate. When they are desperate, they will do anything and everything to survive. So there is a massive operation ongoing. The toolkit is not complete. The game is still being played. And part of the game is to continue to damage Modi's image. So that when there is an overthrow, if they are able to do that, the common man will say, yes, perhaps he was a tyrant. Perhaps I should keep quiet. Perhaps. The same confusion. It's not going to happen immediately. It's going to happen a little later. Right now, there is a complex situation happening both in the United States and in Europe. It's something perhaps we may discuss next time or not. I don't know. We'll see. But a lot of things will depend on what happens elsewhere. But the toolkit is actively ongoing. It has not ended. There are plans being made, large amount of funds being brought in. And I know this because I have friends who are inside those circuits. And sometimes I hear things from them also. And the opposition has been greatly galvanized by this, what they consider a success. That they were able to push back, they were not completely routed, that they were able to damage Modi's image, even if momentarily. And so now they know it works, the toolkit works, and they will go all out for it. So this is to give you a complete sense of the operation as it took place. I'm sorry we have been a bit long, but I think it was necessary to complete this big picture. And that's why I said last time that what happened in Bangladesh is parallels what was planned for India. Maybe somewhat more sophisticated because the Chief Justice and the whole court system would have been in operation, and you didn't need to bring someone from outside and so on. So there is a question from Meenal about what happened in Bangladesh, in Kolkata, in this horrible attack, and maybe about this I will make a comment next time because it also involves something, an understanding of what is happening on the ground level. How this machinery of overthrow has been put in place. And that's again a more detailed discussion, and a very good example is what has happened in West Bengal. So I'll keep that for next time. Let's keep that as the theme, and maybe we'll see that. Kamalambal is saying, I was very disappointed that not a single seat from Tamil Nadu went to the center, even with Annamalai trying to open up hypocrisies of state government. What happened? Yes, this is something which I did ask, and again, I had friends in certain circles who were inside the system. What happened was, you see, Annamalai was the BJP head who everywhere he went, he was drawing huge crowds, far more than the opposition parties. So it was clear he was going to win. What happened, even he lost his seat. What happened was, the team members who were part of his group were bought out. So what happens is during the elections in the electoral booths, you have a representative of all the parties to ensure that there is no mishap. If these representatives are bought out, then many things can be done. So actually that was done, and that is the understanding I was given by people who are inside that system. So remember, it's not enough to have one leader. You must have an entire base of people who are uncompromising. One leader can be eliminated or his team can be compromised and he'll be left alone. And that's what happened in this case. So, but you must understand the levels of desperation involved for doing this already, for resorting to this. But again, I'm just going by what was told. I won't hold myself responsible. I don't have links for this. So Revati is saying again, the SEBI chief was attacked by the same Hindenburg group. That's part of the toolkit in operation. So what they want to do, first they want the stock market to sink. They couldn't do it earlier, they're trying to do now by creating doubts about the SEBI chiefs and his allegiances. And it's the same Hindenburg group. And I forgot to mention, about 1 year before, George Soros had publicly declared that he wanted Modi toppled, and he had announced, I don't remember now, I may be off on the number, but about $1 billion that he was going to invest for toppling Modi. Now that's a lot of money. You must understand, a dollar becomes amplified in India by much more, tenfold more in terms of value. If you take a cup of coffee in each place or 1 hour of work in each place, you can see it's tenfold more that you can do for a single dollar in India. So a billion is a lot. And it can buy up large numbers of people, including demonstrators, keep them going, funded and well fed for doing any kind of mischief. So you must understand the big powers have already openly spoken about this, which is the reason why the BJP also speaks up openly, targets Rahul Gandhi saying, "Are you a puppet of George Soros?" and so on. So yes, the game is still on. Yes, Nikhil Kumar says it's Mahesh Jethmalani. Yes, that's the man who's spoken about this. Yes, I forgot to mention this. Is very important. Mahesh Jethmalani came out with a very important statement, and this was just before all this drama took place with the Supreme Court. And I've put the full link there, where he says that Mahesh Jethmalani alleges cabal in Supreme Court. He openly, this is, remember, a senior lawyer who's saying there is a cabal in Supreme Court which has anti-India interests. And this he said way back, before all this toolkit operation fully got kicked off, all the things which I described. And so it's not coming from just me, and I put the link there. In Tamil Nadu, for example, one of the parties actually said, with the blessings of Christ, Dalit Christians will come to power and they will get all the benefits. Even though they have converted, they will not lose their benefits of reservation. So you see hardcore appeal to religious divisions and splitting the country along religious fault lines. Hindenburg, main investor is George Soros. I put a link. Subsequently, and this is important to point out, the United States Diplomatic Corp. You must understand, Diplomatic Corps is full of deep state and cabal agents. Their job is whatever their country's interest is involved. Has been going around all over the country meeting opposition leaders. This is not normal. And the main consulate general of the United States is actually going around meeting heads of various opposition parties. Obviously, things are happening behind the scenes. They're being lined up, they're being assessed for their position, what is their soft point, what is the thing which would tilt them to turn against Modi, etc. So many things are still ongoing. This is not over yet. So what happened in JCAR hospital, Anupam is asking what was the toolkit. No, it was not a toolkit. It was an expose of the ground reality of the situation. I'll speak about this next time in greater detail. What had happened in West Bengal was that nearly 150,000, if I remember right, party members were put in the police force with no police training. And the level of corruption that it entailed and the compromise of police force was so great that these people literally ran the state as a Gunda force. And what happened in terms of the rape and murder was by this group who was literally running without any kind of accountability. But I'll speak about this later and give you all the links also. I've been gathering these also last couple of weeks. Hema says that Fauci just got COVID after having taken 6 jabs. Yes, it's a joke, but it just tells you how much they lied, saying that the jab will protect you and that you won't get. Verena is saying that what you say about Sri Aurobindo's phrase being used in a distorted way by the opposition, as well as the cramming of minds with information, applies in our times, in to all of our languages, in all aspects of life. How to approach this problem? Could it be a sign that the realm of mental thinking has to be overcome? And are we to switch to supramental thinking? Actually, this is the nature of the human mind. Once you've understood how to hack it, the technology is in place, and it's not new. It's been going on for nearly 100 years. When first the Soviet Union came to power, they were using all these techniques. But the technique was perfected during the Nazi regime and then imported in the United States in the MK Ultra program. And now it is so refined as to be really scary in what it can do. I walk around on the road, going to the dining room. Okay, I'm walking on the road and there's a set of people who have come as tourists who are waiting for their bus. They're all sitting on the footpath. Each one has his mobile phone and is in a state of hypnosis. This is not a joke. Very simple test of hypnosis. Clinical test is your pupils are dilated and your eyelids are not blinking. That's a state of hypnosis clinically. These people are watching on their social media, eyes not blinking, pupils dilated, and in hypnosis. The mind is not functioning, passively feeding. That's why it's called a feed, your feed. They even say it, your feed. So feed in. And that's the programming that's happening. This is extremely dangerous. It's rapidly destroying the human mind and the power of the intelligence and the power of concentration. But for the cabal, that is good because we become more effective as sheep and we are more easy to control. Certainly, the attempt to rise above first requires us to get into active rational thinking. And that's when you can cut through this clutter. I remember as a student when they gave us all this junk, and unfortunately we had teachers who were just as incompetent, who gave us all this junk. And I would ask myself, why? I refuse to have this. And I refuse to do the homework. I refuse to repeat. I refuse to regurgitate. And I got punished for that by those teachers. But the moment you think a little bit or you have a deeper sensitivity, something will tell you something is wrong. So I think more than anything, we need to think and to have a deeper sensitivity of the psychic influence which warns you something is not okay. And this needs to be woken up. And it is this which also they are trying to destroy by turning children into, turning them towards sex early on so that the deeper sensitivity is hardened and covered up quickly. So that's part of the agenda of this whole gender confusion and all that. So Revati says that you have these gruesome incidents. Divine is so full of love and all compassionate. How do we draw strength from the mother to ensure that we prevent such horrors from happening? I don't think you will have a problem. You will never commit those horrors. It's the people who don't have that connection with the presence who commit the horrors. And the programming is precisely to cut you off from the presence. What we need to do is precisely to get ourselves back in connection with the presence, get our children back in connection with the presence. If they feel even a little bit of the influence, they cannot commit those horrors. They cannot be easily hypnotized or led astray. They may still be, but not easily. It's more difficult to break through when that influence is there. So Rampal is asking, where is the link about rip you apart? Okay, I did not put it. Let me put it now. You know what happened? I have so many links and the list became too long. I had to delete a couple of links because YouTube would not allow the number of words. I think it has a limit of 2,500 characters, so I crossed that. What I would simply do is, I don't think I can put the link unless I take out something else. So what you can do is search the word phrase, we will rip you apart, Supreme Court. You will find that link easily. So Revati says, we were taught in our curriculum that fluoridated water and milk are essential for preventing dental caries. Thanks to your sessions, I now know the reality. Yes, unfortunately, you are taught this. And when I was told that fluoride prevents dental cavities, first thing I asked was, if that be the case, why do I have to drink it? I would apply it. So logically, it makes sense to put it in toothpaste. You rub it on the tooth and it will prevent cavities supposedly. Yes, it hardens the tooth. But that's not the best way to prevent cavities. The correct way is to remove the sugar. But so even if you do that, why do you have to drink it and have it go into your bloodstream and go all over your body and damage other things which fluoride does to your whole body? And that was never answered. To this day, when I point out to people, when I tell them, but if this is true, then why not put in toothpaste but not in your water? They go, and then that hypnosis kicks in, they go blank and then change the subject. That's cognitive dissonance. They cannot face this contradiction in terms. It means to recognize that you've been lied to all your life. They can't face it. They shut down and change the subject. It's sad, but that's how it is. Yes, so I'm glad there are other observations which also confirm many things. Somebody, Anupam says, Dhruv Rathi is a journalist funded by Soros who supported Sonam. So you will see all these alliances taking place. Yes, Hema says there's a chatter that Andhra Baptist Church will be used as a tool to pull the Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh away from the NDA. That's one of the forces. Then there is the United States consulate who met him also. And then they don't do it so blatantly. Somebody who's totally unknown to all of us, who's never in the media, will meet them, transfer lots of money, blackmail them, threaten them. Maybe they already have blackmail material on him or on his son or on his daughter or whatever. And they will use any kind of pressure. They're desperate. All pressures will be used. Any fault line they find, they will crack it open. So you must understand how serious it is. Mahalakshmi says Khatakhat scheme. Yes, I didn't go into that. Rahul Gandhi was actually saying, we will give you money Khatakhat. Money will flow Khatakhat, meaning like a machine rapidly. And all kinds of lies were told. But the question was, if people are gullible, then they can be swayed. And for me, it was also a measure of the gullibility of the population. You fooled them before by making promises, now nobody believes you. But when you were given a paper saying, this is your slip that you will encash like a check, they did get fooled once. Will they get fooled a second time? It won't matter. There won't be a second time. The nature of the game is this today. They are so desperate. The moment they come to power, they will make radical changes all along, all through, to prevent any such loss of power hereafter. What you see in Bangladesh will be a good example. Observe carefully, within 1.5 months, they will not have elections, despite the constitution. They'll make up any number of stories and lies to justify it, but it will be lies. Observe carefully the way it's played there, and you will know the game. So I will not go cover those topics again. I think my job was to bring the awareness and make you understand how it operates, and in the rest you should be able to see it as it happens. Yes, there were also trains which crashed. Sabarmati Express was derailed because someone put metal pieces on the track. Not once, we have had several derailments, and it was just before elections. And the blame was put on Modi. You see, Modi government is so incompetent, so many deaths, they are doing nothing. And it was to swing the mood. Thank you for that. I did note, but I had so many things I had to finally edit out many of these things. Rumpel says we have to turn to the mother. Yes, that also, but we have to think for ourselves. The Divine Mother has given you an intelligence. It has given you a power of thought. It has given you a power of action. If you do not exercise that and become passive, you have failed the help given by the Divine Mother, isn't it? And I want to, there's something about monkeypox, I'll keep it for next time. So I want to finish by a quotation from the mother, because this is so important in the current context of the crisis and the danger. The question asked to her, and I'm not giving the full quote, I'll put the link maybe in next time's videos. So whatever links I could not put here, I'll put next time. So this is from 17th April 1951. And someone asks, you said if there were a third world war, it would be the end of the present civilization. Would the terrestrial condition be affected favorably by it or adversely? The question is somewhat stupid, but mother's reply. Listen. Would you ask whether a fatal illness is favorable to health or not? It is exactly that. A civilization, whatever it may be, is the result of very long efforts to become conscious of oneself, of nature, and to master this nature and draw the best possible advantage from it. We were saying a while ago that the training of the physical being consists in preparing an instrument so that the divine may manifest himself. A civilization prepares an instrument so that the divine may manifest in that instrument. The more slowly, carefully, minutely the civilization is worked out and succeeds in conquering the laws of nature, the more favorable is the instrument to the manifestation of the divine. I'm going to pause here from the text. Remember, this applies to all of humanity, but all the more it applies to any culture or space which is spiritually sensitized and spiritually turned, and this is the case for India. If India loses its spirituality, there is nowhere else in the world where that base of spirituality is so complete and deep and widely, richly, diversely and minutely developed. If this can be erased, the future of humanity is put in question. This was the point Sri Aurobindo made in one of his earlier writings. He says the future of humanity depends on whether it follows the Western value system or the Indian or spiritual value system. That will determine the future of humanity. So eliminating this is for all the forces who are against human evolution on the highest priority. So, Mother says, that is why we also have this idea of the prolongation of life. It is to be able to perfect the instrument so as to manifest the divine force which wants to manifest. All the fruits of the work, all the accumulated efforts to become conscious is lost. If, for instance, this civilization we have built, which in a way has so considerably mastered the forces of nature, which has succeeded in understanding laws of an altogether unique order and has accumulated so many experiences of all kinds to reach self-understanding and self-expression, if all this disappeared, it would be necessary naturally to begin all over again. And then, for a newborn child, how many years of slow and insipid education are needed for its brain to be ready to express even a simple general idea? For its movements to be conscious instead of being absolutely unconscious, how many years? Then, for a civilization, how many years would be necessary simply to get back all that is lost? There have been many civilizations on the earth. There are scientists trying to discover what has been. Well, if thousands of years are yet necessary to begin another, obviously, it is a loss of time. So it's happened before. We have lost civilizations so many times. So this should not be lost. It will be such a huge waste. And so many thousands of years. I'm not reading the rest of the text. But she says, if you could remember all your past lives, then you would know how much effort has gone into bringing you where you are. And if this is lost, what a huge loss it would be. So I'll leave it at this. Pause at this point to just make you conscious that what is being targeted in India is not just for India, it's for the world, because India represents the focal point of the spiritual awakening of the world. And that's why when the Asura approached the mother, he said to the mother, the last battleground will be over India. And the sense of this we have to understand. It's not about the war, it's about this battleground, about which will be the direction of our evolution. Will it be the spiritual evolution or the other? So understand we are at a most crucial point, and this year is very critical, not just for India, but for the United States and for many other countries around the world, for humanity even. What happens now will actually decide so many things. The key for us is to become conscious, where possible make others around you conscious, where you cannot at least spread awareness of light, knowledge, simply by presence and by influence, or if nothing else by prayer. But act where you can and make yourself conscious, hold your consciousness. That will have a ripple effect on people around you. Let's all hold this in our aspiration and invoke the divine help for the efforts we make, but also for the efforts that all those others are making, because literally there are others who are in the battleground who will fight even a physical battle where necessary. And pray for all who are standing for the light, consciously or unconsciously, doesn't matter. You don't have to like them. That they act for the light, that is more important. And all instruments of light should awaken and hold their ground and dispel the darkness. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you.